So slightly different today. I've finished letting the glue go off on the workstand for the tablet computer, and I'm just about to use the varnish to finish it off. First coat today, let it dry. I've had the tin indoors over this past week just to make sure that it's up to temperature, because it does get quite cold in here. In fact, it's such a cold day today, I've even got the door shut. And one thing I've been doing during this last week as well, I have been using compact fluorescent tubes for lighting, but what I've done is replaced 2 of them with 30-watt LED panels. Now that's given me a lot better light, and we'll see how it goes from now on. So 2 things I'm going to be doing this afternoon: putting the first coat of the varnish on, and then what I'm doing as well is making preparations for the next project, but more about that later. But the first thing I've done is just made a little stand, 4 2-inch screws in the base. What I'm going to do is use that to support the stand while I varnish it. That way I can do everything apart from underneath. It won't move. I can just move the base, and that way everything's going to stay nice and dry. So here we've got the first coat of the varnish finished, and that's now drying. I'll take it in over the weekend so that it doesn't get too cold. But my next project, I'll be going into more details about what that is, how I'm going to be doing it in a later video. But the next job that I've got to do in preparation for that is really to work out how I'm going to cut all of the joints. Now I've got sectioned pieces of cherry. The main cross beams are going to be the 1 inch by 2 inch, 25 by 50, and they're all going to have mortise and tenon joins. But the legs are going to be 1 inch square, and so in here I'm going to have to cut all of the mortises, and I've got 2 ways that I can do this. I have a trend mortise and tenon jig, which is fine. Now that tends to produce rounded tenons and the associating mortises because you're using a router. Or I can use the bandsaw, and that's what I'm going to be doing today, is just trying to use the bandsaw and the mortiser that I have to cut these joints. Now if I use the mortise and tenon jig, it will produce the size of joint that I need. Now there are going to be 2 joints per leg, one on one face, one on the other. So what I need, they're going to be about 10 millimeters deep, so I don't want them to meet in the middle. That means I'm going to have to slightly offset them. So this is the face that I'm going to be working from. So everything is measured from this face going this way. Now this is set up for the 7mm router bit, and so it's 7mm from the end, 7mm in width. I don't have, and nobody does, a mortise chisel that is 7mm. They either do 6 or 8. So I could do 2 cuts to make it 7. I'd prefer to do just 1 cut. That means I only have to move fences once. And so that's what I'm going to be doing this afternoon, is just marking out and seeing how the cuts go. These are scrap pieces of wood that are roughly to the same size, and that's just proof of concept. So what I'm going to be doing now is just marking up for 6mm and 6mm joints, and we'll see how that goes. So I've prepared the 2 pieces. I've marked face edge and face side on both of them. That's how they're going to go. So this is the outside. This is the outside of the work. So all of the joints need to be measured from this side of the work. So that's what I'm going to be doing now. Okay, so that's the outside piece of the work, of the leg. That's where I've measured, and I've decided to go for 7mm from the outside, but make the mortise 6mm thick to correspond with the mortise chisel. So that's the first one. It's going to be 10mm from the end. The depth of the mortise is going to be 30mm, and in the finished work there'll be a 10mm edge there, so that's where the rails will go, where they will finish. And what I've done then is from this side I've marked similarly. If that's going to be the outside, then that's going to be the outside. That's going to be the corner. So there'll be a rail here and a rail here. So I've marked 7mm from the outside, a mortise of 6, and just going to cut those mortises to see how they go to a depth of 10mm. So here we've got the 2 mortises cut on the test piece, and the nice thing is it's a nice clean cut. The 6mm chisel is a very good one from Axminster. I bought several years ago. It gives a lovely clean cut to the side of the joint, and it's 10mm deep, which means neither cut meets the other, which is what I wanted. I don't want the glue from one joint seeping into the other. So that's got that tested. All I'm going to do now is mark up the rail and cut the first of the tenons to see how that works. So I've marked up the end of the mortise, and I've extended those marks all round so I know where I'm cutting. And of course I want to keep the face side and the face edge in contact with the table and the fence. So therefore that's why I've put all the marks all round, so I know where I'm putting the blade from known edges. Okay, so here's the finished tenon, and this isn't the finished size of the actual rail. This is just a piece of scrap wood just to see how the cuts are going. So that's why I've got such a small shoulder to the piece just here. But the cuts have gone well, and you can see how the joint is going to work. Let me just put the camera down. So here we've got the mortise and the tenon, and it's how I've cut it at the moment. It's quite loose. It's just giving me some idea, but the concept works. So that will be like that, and then the other piece will be like that. I've got to be careful of the depth of the mortise, because otherwise there'll be a little gap, but it shows that that will work. That's fine. Now in this project I'm gonna have 24 mortise and tenon joints. That's going to be a lot of cutting. The mortises are fine with the mortiser, but the tenons are going to be a lot of repetitive work, but at least I know I can do it, and I'll just have to refine how I cut so that the joints aren't too slack or too tight. If they're too tight, I can ease them with a slight chisel cut. If I take too much off, then I am going to be in trouble. But at least I know the concept works. Now I've just got to mark everything else up. That's going to be for another day, and in the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. And when I mentioned that one of these wasn't quite deep enough, you remember I offset it from the edge of the piece by 7mm, and the depth 10, so I was thinking that would give me enough clearance so that neither of these holes would meet. Well, just cleaning up the bottom, and I've put my chisel through the bottom. So what I'm going to have to do is offset it from the edge by 6mm. It's not going to be a lot, but it will give me just that little bit extra clearance down at the bottom of the holes for when I glue up. And a little addendum to the last little snippet of video. Here we've got the 4 legs. They are 25mm square, and the ultimate length will be 650mm. So the whole workpiece will be 650mm high. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is really by way of a note to myself what I've got to do, the order in which I've got to do things, is mark up where all of the mortises are going to go. So as I say, there are going to be 3 per side per leg. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So 6 mortises per leg, 4 legs, 24 mortises to cut, 24 mortises to mark out first of all, and then mark out the varying tenons when it comes to knowing where I'm going to be putting those as well. So that's by way of a note to myself, and that will be for next week.